Well, my colleague Piers Morgan was on the other day and caused a bit of a sensation, followed up by a lot of media outlets right across the world, because Omid Scobie, who has written another book about the royal relationships, and he says that he didn't put in his book, but it certainly turned up in a Dutch translation, that the royal alleged racists, I'm sure they would deny that, were named as the King, Charles, and indeed Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Now, there's a lot of questions about what the palace does about that. Do they sue? Do they bring legal action? What is their recourse? There's a lot of questions about where that information came from, of course, whether Omid Scobie says he didn't put it in himself, that this was an error. The translator has been interviewed, and the translator says that it was there and she just translated what was in front of her. And we have the Sun newspaper as well saying that it's the Endgame. The royals face a split beyond repair. That's the front page headline today. The BBC names the King as the royal at the centre of the race claim in the Scobie book. An hour later, strained Charles has to make a climate speech to the world. We saw a little clip of what he was saying earlier at COP28 in the Middle East. His relationship with Meghan and Harry has surely reached its endgame, says the paper. Fractured beyond repair, apparently, amid the fallout of the royal race row. Well, let's talk to someone who knows what she's talking about on this. Caroline Aston is a royal commentator. Caroline, is this a split beyond repair? What do you make of what has happened?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a happy Christmas at Sandringham, let's put it that way, which was at one point being rumoured that the Sussexes might turn up there if invited. How sad that on the day of the keynote speech that the King travelled to Dubai to make, we have this furore going on about the naming, as you've just said, of himself and Princess Catherine as being royal racists. Although don't forget, way back when Prince Harry was touting interviews and going around talking about spare, he stood back from the word racist and said that instead he wanted to highlight unconscious bias.
Well, he said you're absolutely right, Caroline, and what happened was when he was tackled about this, tackled is perhaps a generous term, by Tom Bradby, the ITV interviewer, he said it was the media that said there was racism, and he seemed to distance himself a little bit from his wife in that. What was your interpretation of that? Because it's very interesting. We've seen the clip 100 times of Meghan talking to Oprah Winfrey, and Oprah sort of going, what? in terms of this conversation apparently about the baby's, this is Archie, about his skin colour and what it was going to be. Then that was written up as a royal racism row, which I think is perfectly reasonable for the press to have done that. And then Harry was tackled about this and he said, well, we weren't alleging racism, this is something that the press were talking about. I mean, do they, in terms of Meghan and Harry, do we know really what they think as a collective unit, to say nothing of what Omid Scobie has decided to write?
Well, they didn't seem to be working as a collective unit when they gave the original interview, if you remember. First of all, we had Meghan saying to Oprah Winfrey that there were conversations, plural, expressing concerns, plural. She wasn't present for the conversations. Harry repeated them to her. So I suppose you could say that's kind of hearsay. And then later in that interview, Harry appears and says that there was a conversation, singular, and it took place not while Meghan was pregnant, as she had said, but before they even got married. So if you remember at the time, a lot of doubt was thrown over who had said what, when, and how. And they maintained at that time only one person had made an adverse comment. That since morphed into two. And of course, the interesting point about this whole furore that's going on is, where has this leak of information come from? Buckingham Palace is saying very few people, if any, saw the very personal and private letter that Meghan is alleged to have written to the King complaining about this. So the palace is saying, no way, Jose, have we leaked information. So where did
and in a sense, why would they? I mean, usually I've been a journalist for 20 years. I know you know about leaks as well as anybody else, Caroline. Usually people who leak things have a motivation in doing so. Usually when people put things like this in the public domain, they have a motivation in doing so. Now, I am sure that the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, is as pure as the driven snow and would always tell the truth on every single occasion, and I wouldn't ever suggest that that wouldn't be the case. But some people might think that.
Well, they might also, since, if you remember, she had to say that she had, in fact, colluded, helped, briefed to produce that very flattering
But she
book.
forgot about it, Caroline.
She'd had a
These things
lapse
can
of
slip your
memory.
mind. These things can slip your mind.
Lapse of memory. Maybe something slipped someone's mind here, but I'm very interested in this white rocked up in the Dutch edition of Endgame. A name is a name. It doesn't need translating. It's a name. Though, of course, now I think they're saying that there was an error in publication, and Mr. Scobie seemed to be indicating that perhaps his original manuscript, which hadn't been signed off, been legalized, went to the translators when it should not have done. And there's a lot of people distancing themselves from all sorts of things, including, of course, the Sussexes. The silence emanating out of Camp Montecito at the moment is pretty deafening.
Well, there's no suggestion, obviously, that they would have been the source for this book. Certainly, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, has talked about previous books. But it's interesting, Caroline, what is your gut on this? Do you think that this being in the Dutch edition, was this cock-up or conspiracy? What do you think?
Well, of course, that question was put straight to the author, wasn't it? Is this a publicity stunt to boost your sales? And of course, by doing that, boost your cash take, because at the end of the day, these books are about earning money. He says not, swore on the life of his family that this was not a stunt. But it's a pretty huge mistake to make, isn't it? And in a sense, you know, that's the last quiver in the Montecito the last arrow in the Montecito quiver of weapons. They've never named who this mysterious royal or royals was. At the beginning, they said it would damage them, be too upsetting. But now here it is out of the open, and it's hard to see where they would go. And don't forget, these are a couple who've spoken of death by 1,000 no comments in the past. And yes, so we have no comment from the palace at the moment, but next week watch for developments, because they're going to have to say or do something in the face of this global wave of interest, this table tennis game of tittle-tattle.
It's absolutely not going away, is it, Caroline?
Absolutely not. This one's going to run and run and run. And really, the book itself consists of a lot of old news, the rich, dark tapestry of toxic royal life, with a new border added on of venom and vitriol. Well, if you want a stocking filler or something to prop up the leg of your coffee table, there you go. It's half price already.